Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining another week of Water Talks. In today's Water Talks, we'll be going through just kind of a mixed bag of a lot of different topics Pat has helped put together here today. So if you're here for InfoWater, InfoWater Pro, you're certainly in the right space here. All right. A few more minutes to go through housekeeping before more people kind of join us here. I'll be your host just in the beginning part here today. I actually have a scheduling conflict. So my name is Tim Medeiros. I'm a solutions engineer with Innovyze. Been with Innovyze for 5.5 years doing support, demos and services and trainings and helping with these webinars and helping with these different stories. Pat will be the main presenter and Nathan will be helping with some Q&A here with Pat as well. Pat and then Nathan, would you like to introduce yourselves briefly?
Nathan, why don't you start?
Okay. Yeah, I'm Nathan. I am the product manager for our water distribution products. So I used to help host these. Always fun to get the chance to hop on and chat with customers. So but yeah, now I help work with the development teams and help prioritize features. So I'm always looking for new ideas, market feedback. So always happy to be here. Pat, to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Patrick Moore. I'm one of the senior technical support engineers. I've been here, about 6 years. Sorry, I'm having some problems with my screen background here, so you get my wonderful green screen without any of the cool things, but that's okay. Very glad to be here. Talk to many of you in support calls. Love helping people. This is one of the funnest parts of doing this job, and training sessions. So looking forward to talking to you all today.
Perfect. Always a pleasure having both of you on. So thanks for making the time. Again, this is Water Talks, so the goal is to create a community, and especially this session I view as kind of proactive help and support, customer success for those of you kind of using our software, looking at InfoWater Pro. This is for you. And if you do have any questions as Pat's going through kind of the different items of which he's prepared quite a few, please do enter those in the questions panel there. And in the coming weeks, we'll still be looking at quite a bit of different hydraulic modeling topics. Next week, we'll kind of go through Info360 Insight. There have been a number of major changes and upgrades to the Info360 platform, custom analytics and very kind of configurable calculations you're able to do with your live SCADA data is a big thing that we'll be highlighting next week, so tune in for that. On the 15th, we'll be back talking about InfoWater Pro kind of specifically, but it does kind of relate to other Innovyze solutions, but we'll be diving in kind of to the back end. What can you do with your solution if you better understand that kind of back end database? And I think Pat will maybe even touch on that back end database, that IWDB folder a little bit maybe today. And then we'll get into swim modeling on the 22nd there. We are still looking for customer presentations. I know it's been a lot of Innovyze talking the last few weeks. We did quite a few customer-led presentations in December this last year. So please, we're looking for volunteers. If you'd like to kind of showcase some of your work, if it involves water, VUD infrastructure, and Innovyze solutions at any point along the way, please let me know. Put your kind of ideas in kind of the survey at the end here. Happy to kind of showcase you on this. It is a pretty open forum for everybody. And then I always forget to say this, but Pat put a lot of work into this presentation, a very helpful handout he's put together. Please do download that in the handout section right there in your GoToWebinar kind of window there. So that is it for me. I will start making you the presenter, Pat.
Okay.
And
then I will share my screen.
Then I'll let you take it from there.
Excellent. Screen, this one. Okay. Excellent here. Well, welcome. Just to kind of give a quick overview of kind of the things that we're going to talk about today. Get my mouse it away that I can see this here. Just a quick kind of splash on our changes to our licensing, talk about our the Talus licensing, as well as the changes that are happening if you still have our legacy licensing. Then kind of a quick review of the InfoWater Pro Control Center. There's some really cool new things on there, as well as some recent updates so that you can now edit all the rules inside that. That really makes that very much more powerful. We'll show that. Then some key tips. We get a lot of questions in support on, hey, I'm a new user to InfoWater Pro. Hey, how best do I use this? Some tips on people who are concerned on how best to bring models in from InfoWater, and some key things that we've seen on the support side that help with that, especially focusing on how powerful what we call a map file rebuild or a model rebuild, rebuilding that map folder, how that solves the vast majority of issues that we often see if people having issues, and then just a lot of other tips. Then talking about some other kind of practical things on, hey, why something like what I called when in the 16.5 years I was a consultant, or 15.5 years, sorry, a model design log, something where you can document the changes you're making to a model, why something like that can be valuable and useful to you. Just kind of showing that, because if you don't use something like that, why that can be really challenging when you have an issue or a difficulty in the model, and then how you can leverage your modeling knowledge when you do learn something throughout your modeling team, and learn from others on your team how to really leverage all the knowledge that your team has so that you guys can really learn from each other faster. I'm going to show some examples of what we do on the support team to help each other on stuff that learns and how you can use something similar, okay? So some of these things hopefully we'll cover. If not, they're definitely going to be in the slides so that they're there, that you can review. There, a lot of the stuff will be pretty self-explanatory, but just as a quick overview, let's talk about some of the licensing changes. So we introduced a new license platform, the Talus license. That's kind of how we pronounce that, the Talus licensing, in August of last year. All future releases of our software are only going to be in that Talus licensing system. So especially if you're on InfoWater Pro, that's really critical. We've already had 4 releases on the Talus licensing platform, and we've got another one coming up hopefully soon that will be released. There is no cost to switch to that new platform, but you do have to request to have your licenses converted. And so this link in here that will give you a lot of information. That's a web page on, hey, what is this platform? What are some of the key things about it, as well as the support portal request form where you can request that. That is also a link, a hyperlink that'll be in those PDF slides, okay? Key thing about the legacy licensing is there are going to be some key changes coming at the end of July. We are retiring our support for the floating license manager. There's more details on the support portal about that, so you can read those there. And I don't want to necessarily go into those here, but that does mean you probably want to be considering requesting conversion of your licenses before then. There are some limitations on what we're going to be able to do in activating and deactivating licenses after that, so please be aware of that. Like I said, there's no cost to switch to that. But especially if you're on InfoWater Pro, that's definitely one of the things that I tell people who contact us in support, that if there's one platform license that if you are an InfoWater Pro user that you really want to be on Talus licensing, definitely InfoWater Pro. So we send this email to people who are asking, hey, tell me more about Talus licensing. So I'm not going to read this or go through it, but this is kind of what we send to people in an email, but that's kind of in there for your information on that. But just kind of give you that heads up if you've not heard about the Talus licensing, you've not heard about that, so you're aware. Definitely something that's pretty important to know about. Like I said, there's no cost to switch to that. It's a lot more secure. It's a lot, the biggest thing, you won't have to worry about running renewals anymore, which was a big deal for a lot of people. So just lot lot of nice things about the Talus licensing platform. So just if you need more questions or you have more questions or need more information, just reach out to us on the support team. Always glad to explain that to people, or as well as your regional sales team as well. Okay, so let's talk about the InfoWater Pro Control Center. What is the Control Center? Well, it's something that now allows you in InfoWater Pro only for users to see and edit all of your model controls as well as the initial status settings all in a single location. That is really handy. In a lot of ways in the past, you had to look in multiple different locations to see, hey, I've got simple controls that are on the elements, I've got rule-based controls, which are in the edit rule-based control menu. I've got maybe some pumps with variable speed controllers, a lot of different places where that information was. So especially even for experienced users, it would take a lot to find those. But for novice users, it was sometimes difficult to find all those and to see those. The Control Center being able to find and to see those easily. In the project group, that's the group where the red arrow is. There's a little icon. That's how you can open the Control Center, or in the Command Center, that's in the lower right, usually of the Model Explorer. There's a new tab in InfoWater Pro. Under the Tools menu group, there's the Control Center overview. So that's the two ways you can get to that. So when you open it, that allows you to see, you can select on the top, hey, what element type do I want to see the things on? And then for that element type, most of their controls are going to be generally on pumps. So that's going to be the default one that comes up first. So initial condition, that's basically the initial status assignment on those elements. Basic controls, that's basically the simple controls that are on that element. And if they are simple controls defined, that's going to be shown as a yes or no. If there are not simple controls, then it's going to show up as blank. Okay, just like right here, this P160 has no simple controls defined on it. If there are rule-based controls for that element, then it's going to show up as a yes. If there are not, then it's going to be blank. And then if there are implicit variable speed pump controls defined for that pump, then you'll see a yes for that pump. And so you can see all of that in one location. If you click on any of the elements in the list, you'll see it, hey, for that element that is selected, over on the right-hand side, all the things that are marked as yes will show up with those controls. So kind of given a little more detail for that, hey, if I select that element, here I'm in pumps, I can see those. And one of the bigger changes in the past, you were not able to edit the simple controls or rule-based controls or the implicit variable speed controls. Now you can actually edit those directly in the Control Center. You select the element, and I'll talk about those in a second, but there's edit for those types of controls up in here. But you can select that element. You can see if it's got both simple and rule-based controls, they'll both show up on the right. So you can actually see what those controls are, just kind of a simple display. Rule-based controls are often a lot more in depth, so it's kind of harder to display the full depth of that rule, but it's going to give you hey, kind of breaking down what is this control. It's looking at this tank level based, this tank, based on its tank level, it's going to turn that pump on. So it's going to kind of give you a simplified version of, hey, what is this rule-based control doing? Simple controls are often a lot easier to display in that way, but that's really handy to see all of that in a single place. Same thing with if I want to see, what those rules are. Again, all of those are here by element type. I can click on those different elements, see the different controls that are there. Same thing. It's going to show up on the right-hand side, the details of those. The initial status, if they're defined, so same thing, all by element type over here. If they're defined, it'll be down here in the lower part of the control. So if I go back here, you can see down here in that lower section of the control, that's where that initial status is, and you can actually modify them there. In this case, the pump 100 and 120 were initially off, so they were defined with an initial status as off. You want to change that, you can change the initial status right in the control center, hit the save button, and then at the top there's a refresh button right up here, so that once you change that initial status, I found you generally want to hit that refresh button, and then it'll update everything and ready to make some new changes for you. The editor of the rules, again, if you select the element and it's got different types of controls, I can then select that rule, select the editor button for like simple controls. It's going to bring up that simple control editor like you're on the Model Explorer, and I open the simple control for that element so I can actually edit them there just like I do in the model controller, and make my changes as I want. And then when I hit update, it's actually going to update, you know, the control center. Same thing with the rule-based controls and the implicit variable speed controller. If you don't see initially your changes, again, just hit that refresh button once you make any changes, and that'll update the control center with those changes that you make. That's that refresh button right there in the upper middle right there. But that's really nice that right now you can now directly edit all of those types of controls. Before, you had to kind of zoom to an element. You could still have the control center open. You click on it in the Model Explorer and then edit it. But it's a little bit easier now. It's nice that you have these little edit buttons directly built in there. It's kind of a new aspect of that control center that just kind of gives you some different options there. So I just want to show kind of a quick example here. Hold on for a second. Let's see. You guys see my model there, Nathan? Let's see if I can see what
Yep.
you guys are seeing. Okay, good. Sorry, I've got my screen that's showing my PowerPoint screen here and not the other screen. So again, there's that little control center button. So right here in the project group, so you can see that. But you've got, you know, the different elements. If they've got controls right now, my valves don't have controls. A lot of times your valves don't. If you've got initial status, which is definitely much more common for pipes than to have controls, but if you do have ones, you can also show, you know, hey, show all my pipes or just controlled pipes, which is handy so that you can sort them. And then also just showing what that reservoir tanks are, whether I want to see, hey, my tank levels or my tank heads, because sometimes you want to know what those are. Really, like I said, there's not really controls on those, but that is going to be helpful at times, you know, to see, hey, what are those tanks that they're looking at, you know, just so that you know what those are. That is helpful there. You know, again, if I select pump 100, it's going to show me the details of those controls over on the right. I click on element 140 over here because that one does have simple controls and rule-based controls. It's going to show me both of those. If I want to edit that rule-based control, I just, you know, selected the rule-based control editor. It brought up that editor, and I could say, hey, maybe I didn't want this at 10, I wanted this at 15. So I can do an update and save this rule and then hit OK. And it hasn't refreshed this yet, so I need to hit the refresh button to actually see that change. But now I can see it, and it's updated. That's there. But I didn't have to change anything. I'm still in the control center. That's really handy. Same thing if I want to edit these to be in there so that I can actually go through and edit it. And obviously my rule-based controller, I just added one. This one is kind of a dummy rule here, but I just wanted to show, hey, you know, with an edit, but, you know, looking at the simple controls versus this one, you can tell this is just kind of a dummy rule-based control that doesn't really mean a whole lot, but that's kind of how you can have something. If this didn't have an initial status and I wanted to add it, then I can say, hey, this is initially on, and again, hit that refresh button so that that's on there. But you can make all those changes. It's really handy that you can see all that and do all that directly in the control center. Really is handy. The more elements that you have, this really starts to be more and more useful, that you can just directly open this and see it. There are times I'll get a model from a client and it's an InfoWater, and they're having a model that's not converging, and I really miss that I can't see this in that platform, because it's a really powerful tool to see everything all in one spot. But just to have that and to see that is really, really handy, and I wanted to have you see that update, especially with the ability to edit all those elements now together. So a couple of key tips if you are an InfoWater Pro, some things that really come up a lot in support questions. One of the things we'll often ask people, hey, what version of InfoWater Pro are you in, and what ArcGIS Pro version you're in? So generally, we always recommend being in the absolute latest version of InfoWater Pro, because we do find and see issues that are either caused by the ArcGIS Pro version or other things that are reported. All those are only going to be fixed in the latest releases. So why you always want to be updated to the latest version, especially if something is caused by an ArcGIS Pro issue. Those tend to get fixed in the latest one. So if you're stuck in a older version, you may have a problem that is really related to an older version. So where can you find those? Those are going to be always on the support portal. Now, because there are legacy licenses, those are the ones still with serial numbers. If your InfoWater Pro still has a serial number, that means you're still using a legacy license. If you have what's called an EID or entitlement ID, that's a Talus license. So you need to be very careful when you check the portal. It'll say, hey, if you've got the new Talus license, then here's the version that you're using. If you're still on legacy license and you got to go to this other page, this is going to be the versions for that. Moving forward, any of the new releases are only going to be on the Talus platform, but definitely make sure to check that support portal periodically and always get the latest release, okay? And then on the support portal, it's also going to tell you, hey, these are the versions that work with that version of InfoWater Pro. Every time you open ArcGIS Pro, it's always going to tell you when there's a new Esri update. We generally recommend don't apply those Esri updates unless you've verified your version of InfoWater Pro has been tested and recommended that that version is okay. But the support portal will tell you that. In the past, that was much more of an issue in some of the earlier versions of ArcGIS Pro than the newer versions, but we do recommend for best use to wait until we have had a chance to test it just for best use. It's definitely been much, much less of an issue in the last year and a half. Esri's definitely, as ArcGIS Pro gets much more stable, but just it's wise, and we definitely recommend that, especially if you go from like 2.8 to 2.9, 2.9 to eventually 2.10. Those first number releases are probably the ones that are more likely to potentially be a problem to definitely wait on, okay? So just to kind of summarize both the current latest releases, currently the latest Talus release is 4.0.3. That needs to use at least ArcGIS Pro 2.8.3, and it's currently tested through 2.9.0. Generally 2.9.0 is recommended for the best experience on that. We are expecting hopefully soon 4.0.4 to come out, but we've got a few issues coming. You want to speak anything on that, Nathan?
Oh yeah, I was just going to mention there was a question in the chat about when we'll support 2.9.1, and so yeah, that should be hopefully next week. Yeah, we're planning next week, if not sooner, having that 4.0.4 out, and our testing team confirmed that it is compliant with 2.9.1. So
awesome. So, and that will also be noted on the portal. So, and if you're on a serial number, the legacy license, your highest version of InfoWater Pro is 3.5 update 3, and that you really can only use up through ArcGIS Pro 2.7.2 with a strong recommendation for 2.7.1 and 2.7.2. The 2.6 versions had a lot of particularly specific issues with table joins and other things that caused a lot of InfoWater Pro issues. Generally, people that once they got off those 2.6 versions noticed a lot of improvements. So if you're still on a legacy license, definitely 2.7.1, 2.7.2, don't go any higher until you get up to the Talus licensing, okay? One other thing, if you are still on a legacy license, make sure you do not install a Talus version. We've definitely seen people who have installed a Talus version that when they try to reinstall a legacy version, it's not letting it connect to the legacy licensing. So you pretty much force your hand to have to go to Talus at that point. But that may cause you some, oh shoot, I now have some issues for a few days or however long it takes to expedite that. Just be aware of that. That's just one of those things, like don't create a problem for yourself. Just be careful on the support portal that you're downloading the right version for your current license. Okay, so that's really important. Another couple things, there are some still outstanding table join issues that Esri is still dealing with. For the most part, they're not impacting most people, but it is still causing some slowness, such that we have made some changes that are kind of minimizing that in InfoWater Pro, but we do recommend if you used the join all layer tables in InfoWater, there's definitely some people that were highly using that as InfoWater users and kind of by default use those in InfoWater Pro. You don't really as much need to do that. And there's a lot of workarounds and other things that we can recommend to people. But if you're one of those people, definitely, because it can cause some slowness in InfoWater Pro. Definitely the latest version's much less of an issue, but just be aware of that. Those are things that we still have some comments in with Esri, not causing crashing due to those anymore, but still causing some slowness in some models. So be aware of that, that we recommend using caution on that. Okay, not gonna spend a whole lot of time in this on how to import a model, into an InfoWater model into InfoWater Pro, but just wanted to show those slides, and there's a quick GIF here of how to do
Patrick,
that. Yes?
Actually, maybe before we go on, just since we're going
Sure.
into a little bit of details on the Talus license, there was one question that is kind of important.
Sure.
It is, will there be a change to InfoWater licensing, not Pro? And the answer is yes, there is now a Talus version of
Correct.
InfoWater. So there's not a lot of new functionality that was added to that version, but from 12.5,
Is
you
the
can
Talus
use a Talus license with InfoWater, and that that can support all the same use cases of fixed or floating license, checking out a license out for offline use for several days. So yes, that is all available. So
yeah, and if you have any questions, just look on that FAQ for Talus licensing and show all the platforms that have a Talus licensing, which is most, unless it is being marked for retirement. Generally, that's pretty much most of the licenses are going to have a Talus version. So, and all those were pretty much released in September. At the latest, I think last year. So they've been out for a while. So pretty much they're all there. So
I'll also mention, since we've been talking a bit about new versions coming out, and maybe you haven't been aware of these new versions or what's new. That is maybe one thing I've heard from customers before, that like, hey, can I get a notification when there are new versions, or like just simple summary. So I am happy to say that I've seen some of the resources that we are going to be adopting from Autodesk. So you may know Autodesk has a massive user base, excellent technology, and we're going to be able to be leveraging some of their platforms. So coming soon, eventually, is that you'll be able to see your active licenses that you have available of InfoWater or water project, really any Innovyze product among your other Autodesk licenses, you'll get notifications when there are new versions, and you can click and see the release note. So I am hoping for a much more streamlined service that's more
Which is
modern.
cool.
So yeah, that's at least
Which is really cool.
some good news coming up.
Awesome.
Back to you, Pat.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. So just to kind of show, there's a little illustration here of how you import a model. So I'm going to kind of show that. This is kind of in words describing it, but this actually shows you, hey, I go into an InfoWater project, I browse to it. If it's not already in a file geodatabase map file, you do not have to save those changes to the old file. That's kind of what it's asking when it was asking, hey, do you want me to save those changes to that old model? Because it will save that map file, but it'll convert that personal geodatabase to a file geodatabase, because ArcGIS Pro requires a file geodatabase map file. Like I said, it takes a second to add those new nodes, and as it's doing that, generally the bigger your model, the longer this will take. But pretty much once it's done, it's there, and then you can start adding, your base map layers or other things. If you saw on there were background layers that this model already had, generally those things will, if they were in the old model and it can still connect to them, you should be able to see those once you import. And then it just starts showing some other things here of, hey, you can do some other views in InfoWater Pro that you couldn't necessarily do any other platform, but now it's just repeating here. But that's just kind of giving you an example of what that's like. Most models generally are going to import very smoothly, very quickly, but some key tips is kind of what I wanted to show here, and that is, A, make sure your InfoWater model has a spatial projection defined. The reason for that is ArcMap, which is what InfoWater ran in, really kind of didn't care. If you didn't have a spatial projection defined, it was like, no big deal, no problem. ArcGIS Pro, though, there are several features that will not work because ArcGIS Pro says, hey, if I don't have a spatial projection, I won't label anything. I won't do anything that requires a spatial join. So what are some common features that require a spatial join? So like elevation assignment, it won't do that. Demand allocation, that's a spatial join, it won't do that. So key things that you're like, hey, how come this doesn't work? If it doesn't have a spatial projection defined, it won't do that. You can add a base map, the things that are generally pretty important and you kind of want to do, you should have a spatial projection defined anyway. But in case you have an older model that maybe doesn't, just something to know. It's something that ArcGIS Pro is very particular on, and probably rightly so. I mean, really, models should. That's kind of where it tells it where am I in space, what's 1 foot on the map supposed to be. Spatial projections are pretty important, but that's why. So that's just kind of a quirk that's a little bit different in ArcGIS Pro than it is in ArcMap and from InfoWater. That's important to know. Also, in a few models I've seen have had issues importing if in your InfoWater model, the model layers were not the top layers in the table of contents. Pretty much it's an easy fix. If you don't have InfoWater, you can always send this to us. We can always fix this. You can always recreate the MXD pretty easily to do this as well, but sometimes that's caused some issues. And then lastly, what we call a rebuilding of the model map file. And I have procedures on a couple slides here. I'm not going to go through the procedure because they're kind of dry in details, but I'm going to put them in the slides. So in case you're like, hey, what is that? How do I do that? Generally, I would say in the last several years, most people who've had difficulties with the model importing, the overwhelming vast majority of those, a model map file rebuild has fixed most of those. So it's pretty amazing what that does, but that's something that does that. The other thing is in that little GIF, they kind of showed, hey, if it had a personal map file geodatabase. So if you're like, hey, I don't know if my model does or not, if you look at the map folder and it's got a map MDB, that's a personal geodatabase. If it's got a map.gdb, that's a file geodatabase. If during that initial conversion something happens or you stop it, sometimes you're going to end up with both of these in there. Now, InfoWater will still by default use that personal, so it'll still open, but when you try to open that model or import that model into Pro, it's going to get very confused if there's both of these, personal and file, in there. So the easiest way to fix that is do that rebuild, and that'll recreate this entire map folder and just make it as a file geodatabase. But every now and then we'll see that in support that, hey, there's a model with both in there, and it definitely does not like both. And usually the only reason that happens is something happened to interrupt that initial import into InfoWater Pro, and it, you know, ended up creating both in this map folder. So if you have something that's like that, just something to watch out for that's on there. Here's that rebuild procedure. There's two ways to do it, with a new MXD or without in InfoWater. And I'm not going to go through those again. Those are there. They'll be in the slides. If you need to go through that, you can contact us. If you have it, ultimately, if you really have any models that's having any problems, just reach out to us in support. We're always happy to assist you. Every now and then you have a model that needs special attention or is having on. Most models, for the most part, generally import without any issues at all. If it's a well-built model, it's pretty much generally going to come in without any problem. But if you have one that's giving you issues, just reach out to us, and we're always happy to assist you and let you know. And generally, if you have a bunch of models that you're doing and a bunch of models with problems, you're probably going to find some consistencies. Oh, I'm seeing what happened here, and probably most of those are just generally going to need a model map file rebuild, and that's probably going to fix all of them. You know, it's most of the time that's it. It's pretty simple, but if there's something else, just let us know and we'll help you figure it out. Every now and then there's an oddity that occurs, but for the most part, it's usually pretty simple. Okay. Now, what about when I'm in InfoWater Pro and I've got somebody, I need to send a model back to somebody in InfoWater, or I've still got some InfoWater licenses and I've got some new InfoWater Pro licenses. How do I use both? The good thing is the database for both is the same. So, you know, most things are identical. And if you know that and you know you're going to be using both, or I've got a client who's in both, you know, hey, for the most part, things are going to be fine. But there are some key things to keep in mind to help that maintain and be smooth. First thing is, hey, if I've got some new features in InfoWater Pro that aren't in InfoWater, you know, don't try to use them both, because obviously, like the control center, you know, hey, if I've got that in Pro, I'm not going to see that in InfoWater. So, okay, you know, I've got that. You know, hey, if I'm trying to do a feature that's a new feature in InfoWater Pro, it's not going to potentially be in InfoWater. So you got to be aware of that too, like the allocation to service lines in InfoWater Pro, that's not in InfoWater. There are some minor engine differences, things like they made some changes to allow some slightly different pressure dependent demand, some advanced convergence data. You may not even use those, but if you do, and you know, hey, I'm going to be using both platforms here, I've got a client who's still in InfoWater, probably don't want to make use of those InfoWater Pro only features. You're probably not going to be doing that anyway, but just in case, you know, just to maintain that ultimate capacity, just some things to watch out for. So, you know, here's what those are, those specific convergence options in the general tab, things like, hey, I can add some max unit head loss error or max flow change. Don't know many people yet who are really making use of those, but if you are and you're trying to send it back to someone in InfoWater, probably don't want to do that. You know, same thing of on the demand tab in InfoWater Pro, there's some new pressure dependent demand options. Same thing, probably don't want to make use of those in InfoWater Pro if you're going to send it back to somebody in still plain InfoWater, because of to maintain full capability between the two. There is some tiny layout and naming changes in the general tab. The actual like accuracy is now relative flow error. You know, they put all the convergence data on the right-hand side instead of kind of mixed as it was in InfoWater. They all make sense. It's just understanding, okay, it's a slightly different layout. Same values are going to show up in InfoWater. It's not changing the terms, but just be aware of that. You know, just going to be some tiny changes there. Key thing is, though, make sure your InfoWater and your InfoWater Pro are both up to date. People are in older versions of InfoWater. You're definitely going to run into some problems with that pressure dependent demand and the emitter changes. They might not be able to, they might get an error when they open the model or when they try to run the model. But if they're at least in InfoWater 12.4 update 14 or higher, there's no problems. If they're in the Talus version, no problems. If they're at least in 3.5 update 3 of InfoWater Pro, which is the last legacy license version, generally not going to have any problem going back and forth. But sometimes people are stuck in 12.4 update 4 or something really older version of InfoWater. Those are, you know, update 4 through 8. Those are the ones that generally have the biggest problems. Some easy fixes, if you are, you can always, generally you probably weren't using the new emitter features or the new pressure dependent demand. You can always copy the blank template copies in the old InfoWater version and overwrite the blank versions that was used in InfoWater Pro as a short-term fix, but the permanent fix is just update your InfoWater and then it'll be like, hey, I'm fine. You know, but just so you know, there's just some things to know on there. How to create a blank MXD if you don't have InfoWater, to create an MXD to send it back is kind of a, how do you do that? You know, how to create this file, and there's a link here that actually shows you and walks you through this process. It's very simple, very easy. All the client has to do when they open it is do the reset display after initializing, because the model layers won't quite look the typical way, but if you do that reset display, then it'll look exactly like what they expect the model layers to look like, and then they're fine. And they just save their model and they're, hey, this is good, I'm ready to go, you know. Or you could even send them an old MXD. As long as the MXD and the IWDB folder name match, you're also good. So that's a couple of tricks there, but generally that's going to come up with people, so I put that on there. You know, some other tips, you know, that are on there. ArcGIS Pro, when you open a file, doesn't use Windows shortcuts. That always drives me nuts. But if you open Windows Explorer, that does use Windows shortcuts, and you copy the path, you can paste the path into here and then hit enter, and then you can get there. That's a nice time saver. Haven't quite figured out any other easy workaround for that, but that really can get you where you're going. If you're like most people, you have probably, that'll save you 12 clicks to open a model versus like 2 or 3 with the Windows shortcuts you probably have, you know, to go on there. But that's something that saves me a lot of time. Since ArcGIS 2.8, Esri added a kind of a default saving that will try to save your model by default every 5 minutes, which can really slow down. And sometimes people's model saving takes a little time because it's saving on the network. We kind of recommend people turn that off, or at least extend that from 5 minutes to maybe longer. Otherwise, it's really slowing people down and really, you know, hey, how come this takes so long and what happened? It's this Esri thing, and that's under the application general project recovery. Just uncheck this box or increase that time. Nathan, you want to say something?
Yeah, I would actually mention also that, you know, since InfoWater and InfoWater Pro actually store their changes continuously in the virtual folder path, you don't actually need to be saving your model, you know, or saving your map every 5 minutes, because the data's there and you can always recover it in case of crash.
Absolutely, that's right. If anything goes wrong and your model crashes, it's actually directly in that virtual database. Absolutely. If you've got a high DPI monitor, sometimes the icons in your Model Explorer get like super tiny. There's a Esri fix on how to do that. There's a technical article there. Every now and then that comes up. Hey, how come my icons are so small? Real easy fix, but I put that on there. If any time, this is more of an issue in older versions of InfoWater Pro, but every now and then I'll see this. You'll open up an ArcGIS Pro model, and before you initialize one or more, the model layers will have a red exclamation mark on it. And if you initialize it, then you'll get some kind of error. Hey, I had a problem initializing, I don't like it. You know, well, I won't initialize it for you, but easy fix, you just delete all 6 model layers, then initialize, it'll recreate them, and again, do that reset display, that little, where's my mouse button here? Right there, that little reset display, and that will make the model layers look like what they're supposed to. That'll fix that. Simple, easy fix, but every once in a blue moon that comes up. If after installing you don't see your model explorer, it means these folders for the added manager did not get added in. Generally, you just need to close and open it a couple times and it's there, but check that path that's shown. It's that second one, really. If it's not exactly showing like that, usually sometimes they get a double click on that MDB soft shared / MW soft shared to put a second folder path in there, and that causes that issue. But just fix that, close it, reopen it, and then it's fine. Couple of issues that are going to be fixed in the 4.0.4 release coming up, but have impacted a number of users. In the default template for InfoWater Pro, there's this missing map folder. And so when they're creating a new model, it will give you an error. Hey, I can't create a new model because I don't have this map folder. It's just a blank folder. But if you go into here, program data is a hidden folder. So you have to tell Windows Explorer, hey, show hidden folders. Browse to this directory and just add a blank map folder, capital M, lowercase a, p, nothing inside it, just a blank map folder. That'll permanently solve that issue. Once 4.0.4 comes out, that'll also solve that for everybody. But if you're on any Talus version, generally that seemed to be impacting a number of people. Unless you're creating new models, you may not even notice that problem, but if you are, that's an easy fix. So just notice that. Same thing with if you're doing an EPNet export. Sometimes we've noticed a number of people in the newer Talus versions, it gets this unable to organize the pump data error. It's also a super easy fix. Just run an update database from map command under the command center utilities. That also will completely resolve that error, and it goes away, and then you can export it and it's all fine. But if you're in one of those newer Talus versions, those are a couple things that have been coming up for a number of users, and I wanted to put those on there. If you need to do a rebuild in InfoWater Pro, I'm not going to go over these procedures, but this is a slightly different procedure. And again, this refreshes your model, cleans it up. It's always a good thing to do periodically. 2 different options for it that are on there, but just some things on there. Now, getting into kind of some of the cool things. So, hey, hey, what is a model design log? Hey, how do I keep track of changes in the model? Do I even track them at all? Do I have a little notebook, track it on paper? I remember doing that in the past. Do I even keep any records? If any changes that are made, do I keep something electronically? Why would that be valuable? Generally, if everything goes okay in your model, not having a log probably doesn't hurt you. It's when something goes wrong. My model crashed. There's some technical difficulty or something goes wrong. Inevitably, any project, something seems to go wrong. And so that's when your design log is nice, because it allows you real easily to recreate work if you need to, because you know exactly what was done. Helps you diagnose issues. If you have some kind of systematic error, hey, what was done, let's find it, and we can easily diagnose it and fix it. I used to find it very helpful when it came time to write reports, because everything that we did and why we did it that way was all documented in our model design log. Why don't people have anything like this? Well, probably because a lot of people may not know, well, how would I even do it? Honestly, it does take effort, and because it takes effort, there's often a lot of resistance initially to it. It does take time to kind of set some kind of consistent standard. If you had everybody doing a design log in a different way, it's not really as useful. Having one way you kind of do it as a company generally is much more helpful, because then anybody can pick up anybody's design log and then it always looks the same and they know what to look for. And that makes it a lot more powerful. In the times and the companies where I've worked on, I can guarantee you that the users I had who struggled to do a design log once they had a project problem occur always came back to me and said, I now know why you want us to do these, and I will always do this moving forward. Because they understood, like, hey, when things go wrong, boy, this design log it saved my bacon, or boy, next time this will save me a lot of headache. Because I now know why you want us to do this, And so what kind of things would that include? Like, well, hey, every day, hey, this is the model that I open. This is the scenario I was working in. This was, me who's doing the work. And if I have multiple people working in a model, then one place where all this is documented, so not two people aren't doing the same work. Two, hey, what was the work that we actually did? I made these changes to the model. I added these elements. I transformed these elements. I created new scenarios. I added data sets. Any kind of changes you're making, just documenting what's on there, that's so helpful. Or, hey, I'm calibrating and these are the changes I'm making. If you're making decisions on a product, on a project, hey, I had a meeting with a client, or hey, we had a scope change, or hey, we had a project meeting and we decided to do this. All those kind of things. If you document that in there, it's very clear when you have a question. Why did we do this? You can usually remember what you did today or yesterday. It's what did you do 6 months ago and why? That's what's hard, because a lot of times you get projects that get delayed and then you get to move on another project. And then it's like, oh man, where were we? What did we do? You don't often have 3-4 hours to kind of review and get back up to speed. If you can get up to speed in 20 minutes by picking up your design log and just doing a quick refresh, man, that can save you hours or longer. Cumulatively moving forward, that's going to be very, very helpful. If anybody, hey, think about COVID. If someone's out and I've got projects, I got to pick up somebody else's work without knowing anything, that's really hard to do without talking to somebody. But if your design log could really help tell you everything they need, boy, that's really helpful. That's so helpful. And here's just kind of some examples. And I can, if you want to know more, I can send you. I probably wouldn't do these in Excel nowadays. I used to. Things like OneNote are much more powerful, but every day we here's the date. We're working in this model. Here's the name of the model. We're in this scenario. Hey, when we create external files, we used to use different color coding to just kind of help us see things. That was often very helpful. Blue for model opening and closing, I think orange for files. It just helped us find stuff, hey, when we'd run a model, we'd have observations, and then yellow was changes that we'd make to the model, different things like that just really help you. You'd make a scenario. I often tell this in training class, hey, copy those 3 tabs on the scenario, the data set tab, the facility tab, and the general tab, so that you always know, hey, this is where this came from. I always wanted my people to look at that. All those kind of things, when you document it, mostly because we'd run into issues when people didn't look at those, they created those, and it would create problems for that model. So it's just nice to have someplace, hey, this is what we did, and why we did it this way. Just some examples. And then, hey, when I learn something, how do I share this with my team? How do I, help people do that? Internally, we do this with a program called OneNote, which is a Microsoft Office product, which a lot of people use Office 365, so you often have access to this. OneNote is nice because data is searchable. Anybody in your team, there we go, mouse. There it is. Anyone in your team can update the file. If you save that on your team site, you have a lot of different possibilities for organizing your data because there's tabs on top. You can have pages on the below, and I'll show you some examples of this. new data is highlighted, so it'll tell you, hey, somebody else edited something. So it shows you, hey, this is new. And on there, you can share tips and tricks. Hey, I learned something. So you don't have to do this, or hey, this is the way we do it, so that we get consistency. If you're the checker for stuff, you generally want to have things done in a consistent way. And then, hey, if you've got recommendations on how we should update it a more efficient way, then let's update our procedure. So we don't have a whole bunch of different procedures, because that's a lot harder to check, kind of thing. But just one place where you have people look for that information instead of being kind of scattered, and just kind of some examples here of something that we do. You can see up top, you can have different tabs that are on there. And then like this is InfoWater Pro, InfoWater Pro, H2Net kind of things. Whoops. You can have different groupings that are here, and different tabs and sub tabs. You can collapse these. You can search for stuff, and when anybody adds anything new, it'll put it in bold, which is really kind of handy. Hey, somebody added something on this page, and it'll show me the initials for it, and if you hover it over, it'll tell me who it was and when. So that's really handy, so you can know. And just kind of some examples of that, like, hey, I want to search for something on Fireflow. I can even just type in partial terms, but I can easily click through these, as well as, hey, if I'm here, it will show me in that grouping, and sometimes I can see in that grouping other things related to that. You can also insert files on here, which is kind of handy. Like here's, a water talk that I gave last year that I often share. These are links to videos or the actual slides that are on there, because I copy and send those to people, so you can actually insert stuff that's on there. It's just really helpful. You can also put links to folders, so hey, this would actually open this, on our oops, I haven't updated this since we moved we changed our Teams link, so I got to update this to the new link, because we're moving that over. But so that these are files that I have and share with people of different things, so that our team can have that. But I'll have to update that now, that we made a change to our Teams files locations. But it's pretty cool that you can do some things like that and have some things like that. But these are some ways you can share that information. Hey, if I learned something, I can put that in there. If someone else on my team learned something, they can put that in there. If we have different procedures, we can put that in there. It can just help us leverage the knowledge that we have, so that, hey, we're not always relearning or making the same mistakes over and over. Those kind of things are really pretty cool. But any questions as we go here? So
Yeah, we're in the last couple minutes before we're at the end of the hour. I've been answering most questions. So yeah, thanks for those who did submit questions. I see another less of a question, but a tip that flagging and commenting capabilities similar to what we have in ICM would be super useful. So thanks for that vote. So on that note, as a sort of new product manager, I found out about this talk a few minutes before we started that I'd be helping, and I was wishing I could have made a poll question, but yeah, I'm really always happy to talk to any users that might have ideas or suggestions or any kind of workflow that you think is really important in modeling in your everyday life of InfoWater Pro that you'd like to chat through. I'm always open to ideas. I'm taking ideas from the market and working through technical solutions with developers. So happy to chat. If there's any other questions, you can reach out to either of us. Always great to have Patrick share his wealth of knowledge. You're kind of airing all of the problems that we've seen in the software, but happy to make it available and show users the workarounds, potentially before you run into the issue. So let's see, any other questions coming in?
And obviously reach out to us and support, the main support line, 626-568-6869, email us at support@innovyze.com. You can, if you're on the support portal, definitely you can make a case on there. If you've got a problem, contact us. We're so happy to help. If you've got an issue, let us know, because we, definitely there are sometimes things happen, or you might have some unusual issue that happen in your model. Sometimes it does mean, support's help. Sometimes we need the development teams, help. It's much more rare, but sometimes it can happen. You just, and we always try to provide, either if there is an issue, a workaround or something else, to help keep going, things that are there, but man, InfoWater Pro's come so far, and it's really in a great place, and it keeps getting better and better all the time, but just let us know if you have any problems or issues. Those are just some things that generally should help most people, if there are some known problems or other things. Like I said, that next release is going to fix a number of those, so most of those probably 4.0.4 probably won't even be issues anymore. But anything else? Any other questions, Nathan?
There was a question on, does the GIS gateway, you mentioned at one point Esri having a tabular join issue affecting the GIS gateway, and there was a question, does this affect the GIS gateway geometry updates? Okay.
Not that I've seen. No, it's more of something that generally, if you're doing the join all layer tables issue and just some slowness, it still joins. It's just things, and especially the larger your model is more problematic. Generally, for anybody who's probably under 100,000, probably didn't even notice the slowness. But if you're in a over 100,000 pipes, potentially, noticeable, where, versus, sometimes switching models probably only takes 30 seconds or less, to switch might take minutes or more, if they're joined because of that, and in some cases was taking even longer, inordinate times, and all related to that issue, and so, like I said, it's something we've already implemented some things to help mitigate that by breaking the join, even if the user has it, before switching, to kind of just saying, hey, we know that's a problem, so even if somebody has it, let's just break it before switching scenarios, so that that will minimize that until Esri fixes that. But it's still just so people know it, because it's still kind of something. It's the same problems that InfoWater had when it first came out. I remember, because I was a user when that came out. It's they're not that much different, oddly enough, but Esri will work those out, but they're still kind of impacting us, and so just as long as you know about it, that's really the key issue. Hey, it's still having some impact, and so if you're kind of, or one of those power heavy users, just know that, hey, you don't really need to make as much use of it anymore. And if you're some user that was kind of had some procedures, just contact us. We can generally help you find some workarounds that should help you in the meantime. Awesome.
Yeah, great. I don't see any other questions.
Okay.
Just a request that we increase the font size in the control center. So nice. That sounds good.
Okay. That's great suggestion.
Yep.
Awesome.
Right,
well, like I said, we'll probably have this up on the on-demand, because this is a good one, and they'll probably also have the slides on there, so that, and then, like I said, if you have any questions or need any help or having any problems, definitely reach out to us. We're more than happy to assist you in resolving any issues. So don't suffer curse the software, you know, but definitely keep up to date. Match those ArcGIS Pro with the right InfoWater Pro version. I guarantee you a lot of times it's as simple as that. Most people who have kept up to date are like, man, it's been working awesome for quite a while. Most people who have not have been like, oh, I'm having so many problems, you know, and that's always the first thing we ask people, you know, hey, well, what's your ArcGIS Pro version? What's your InfoWater Pro version? Let's make sure it's not that. Are you on a legacy license, Talus license, you know? But like I said, it's really getting pretty smooth, you know, in the last year and a half. That's resolved a lot of the big issues. But, you know, hey, if you still having problems, having issues, reach out to us. We're always glad to help you. Awesome. Well, hey, thanks everyone for attending. This has been great. And I guess we'll just close it there.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of the week. Bye.
Bye, everybody.